Welcome back. So today we're going to be continuing on from where we left off in the last video. If you didn't see it, you can catch a link in the description that shows how we got up to this stage here, and you can also find all the code in that description of that video. So in this video we're going to be continuing on, as I mentioned, from where we left off. So we'll be working on the hero section. So here is the site that we are creating. So today we're going to be styling this header text, creating our button, and doing all of the images just here that will be displayed like this. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that all of the 17 columns are displayed beside each other rather than underneath each other like this. So if we jump into the developer tools, you can quickly have a look that we need to make all of the adjustments onto the images display class just here. So if we quickly put in display of flex, you can see that they're now being displayed alongside each other. And if we add a item called justify content called space between, it will align them nicely and evenly across the page. But if we look here, we can see this isn't quite what we want. So if we zoom out, you can see that the actual width of these is wider than the page. So we need to make sure that we're setting an explicit width for this element. So if we take a look at the example here, so to find the width of this item, we're going to click on this class just here, and we're going to start applying a width. So it looks like it'll be around 1800 pixels. So if we set this, but then add a margin of 0 auto, this will make sure that it's centered. And we just want to adjust the width here so that all of these images are displaying as normal. So if we check here, we can then see when it starts to shrink the actual image. So you can see it's almost there. Okay, so it looks like the width is 1900. So if we take this and go back to our page, if we add this width to our images display and still make sure that we're centering, we can then say position absolute. We want to say left of 50. And then we're going to say margin left. So as you can see, we're using this margin left property here, and then we're using the calc, which gives you more flexibility in getting the exact numbers that you need. So for example, here we've taken minus 1900 pixels and we're dividing this by 2 to make sure that where we have this left position, we're then making sure that the middle of these items are centered in the middle of the screen. So if we take this CSS now, we're going to add this into our page. So we'll add this down here. And the next thing we need to do is set a height and a width to these image columns. Now at the moment, we obviously need to make sure that we are, because we know we're only going to have one item here. So this one has 3 and 3 and 3 and so on, but some have 2 or only 1. So because we're only having 1 at the moment, we're going to make sure we get the width right. So if we look at this, we can see, if we zoom in to 100% again, this looks to be around sort of 200 pixels. So if we set this for now, so we'll zoom back into 100%, and we'll add a background color. And we also need to make sure that we have a margin in here as well. So now we just need to play it by eye and make sure that the width that we're setting here looks very similar to the one over here. So probably a slightly bit less than 200. You may have noticed there I changed between using width to min width. So when you're using the flex box here and display space between, it automatically aligns the width. If we set minimum width here, it forces it to use the actual numbers that we're giving it. So this looks to be okay, this number just here, maybe slightly smaller, so say 150. And then we'll just set a minimum height for now, but this will be set by the actual images inside. So we'll make this 200 pixels. So if we close this now and just look at what we have, you can see at the moment you can scroll across, but when we actually have this added to the page, we won't allow the user to be able to scroll. But if we zoom out, we can see that this looks very similar to the one on the other side of the page. So what you would do to make it so that the user can't scroll across is in our CSS. So first we'll just take these column stylings and we'll paste it in. And then up here in the header and body, we're going to say overflow X hidden. So this makes sure that any horizontal overflow doesn't allow the user to scroll. So if we refresh this, we can see now you can't scroll. I'm trying to scroll across the page and it won't let me. So if we zoom back into 100%, it's still the same. So you want to make sure that we actually use the center property here, so justify content center, so you can see the difference between these two here. If it's spaced between, it's just a slight difference here, and we want to set this minimum width to be 102 pixels or 100, just to round this amount here, and it should make it a lot more even. So if we change this again between these two, you can just see where that is adjusting the width, and we want to be using center just here. So just make sure that you update that into your CSS file so that we have 100 or 102, a margin of 5 pixels, and then justify content is centered. So now that we have this element appearing, we need to make sure that we work on our hero text. So if we go back to this example here, that we can see that's in the middle of the page. So if we go back to our code editor or the developer tools, we can see the hero section just down here. So if we drag this above, we want to center this like so, and we're going to be adding similar styles for the button that we're using up here. So if we look at our CSS, we can see that we have the top button and green button. So if we copy these and apply these to our button, so we can see we have our button down here, and if we just go to add attribute and class, get rid of this padding, we can see this is now styled like this, but we want it to be quite a bit bigger. So if we zoom back in to 100%, we can see that this button is quite a bit larger than the other one. So the font size is slightly larger and it's a little bit taller as well. So if we go down here, we can see that this is okay for now, but we want to add another style, another class onto this that will enlarge this button. So what we're going to do is take these changes that we've made into our atom file. So first we're going to make sure that our hero section is above our images display, and we'll center the text inside our hero section before adding the styles to this button. So the first thing we're going to do is add our hero class, and this will be text align center, and then we're going to scroll down to our hero section down here, and where we have our button, we'll add these classes that we just did. And then we want to select our entire hero section and copy it, and then add it above this images display area just here. So if we save this, go back and refresh, we can see we have it appearing like this, but now we just want to make sure that we enlarge this button. So we're going to add a new class just here called large button, and then we'll go back up to our CSS, and we're going to say font size 12 pixels. And then if we just check what padding we had already, okay, so this was the existing padding. Then we're going to add 5 pixels onto each, so that'll be 15 and that'll be 20. So if we save this now and go back and refresh, we can see that this looks a lot more like the button over here. One more change we need to do though is, you see where we hover this one, the cursor changes from the standard cursor type into an actual pointer cursor, so you can actually click it. So we want to make sure that we have this same effect as well. So to do this, on our large button class, or even our top button class over here, we're going to say cursor is pointer, and then save. And if we refresh this now, we can see that this is now changing the style. So now we need to look at the actual display of our text just here. So if we have a look and see which font is being used. So again, as we did before, we want to select this element, go to computed, and then just type in font family. We can see this is still the same, so we know what font this is. And then we can see the size. So again, we want to say font size, this is 30 pixels. So we're going to add a new class down here called heading text, and we'll again set the font family, so this will be the same one from up here. We know the font size is 30 pixels, and we want the font weight to be bold. And then we can just take this new class and apply it to our H1 just here. This is closer to what we want, but we need to make a few more adjustments for the font color, and we need to set a maximum width that this header text can span. So if we look here, we can see this goes on to a new line. This is because they've set a maximum width for this area. So first we need to find out this color. So again, we just say color. We can click onto this. We can find where the color has been set. So we'll just borrow this. Go back up to our heading text. Add the color. And then we'll set a max width of 500 pixels. Okay, so almost, we'll probably make this slightly smaller, 400 pixels, and then we want to center this. So again, we can say margin 0 auto. Okay, there we have it. But before we finish here, we want to add a little bit more spacing between these two items. So as you can see over here, there's a bit of a gap just here, and a gap above as well. So if we look at as, we can see this is quite close and this is quite close, and as well as underneath the button as well. So we want to make sure that we keep these gaps on here. So to begin with, we can add this to our element. So we're going to create a new class called margin top. So we'll put MT50 and MB50. So this will add a margin to the top and the bottom of 50 pixels. Now it's quite useful to make classes like this because then you can reuse it throughout your page. So this will say margin top 50 pixels and then margin bottom 50 pixels. Now there are a number of CSS frameworks out there that will have a lot of these useful classes pre-written for you, so you can just use them straight in your CSS. And it helps to keep everything neat and tidy, and you can reuse a lot of these classes. So we're just going to go ahead and add these classes to our item here and add one to our button underneath as well, so we have that margin underneath. So if we save this now, we can see this spaces everything out nicely to be more what we're looking for. So if we compare the two sites now, we can see that it's starting to look a bit more similar. So we just need to actually start adding the different images over here. Now we're going to be using Unsplash for these images, so if we just open up Unsplash now. So to begin with, we're just going to go through and just take the image address of the first few pictures. So here's one. So we'll go up here now, and inside our first column, we're going to just add an image source of this image. Now we'll change this in a moment, so it's only using the height and width that we actually need. We're going to be adding another one, and we'll just use these two for now, but you can use any images that you want. So if we just save this and just quickly have a look. Okay, you can see behind here they're appearing, but we need to make sure that we set the correct height and width for these images. As we look, if we zoom out again, we can see that the first row has 3 and the second one until we get to around here. So we'll add one more, then we'll copy all of these and add them to the second row. So to begin with, we'll add 3 images to every single row that we have here before we change and add this style that they have here, where it curves down with the page, just like this. So we now have 3 sets of images for all of our 17 columns. So if we save this, go back to our page and refresh, we can see it looks quite crazy at the moment, but don't worry about it just yet. We want to zoom out to 50%. And then inspect our element. If we go to our image just here, go back 1 to the column, and we want to make sure that we add a new class just here, and that fetches the image. And we're going to say width 100 pixels, and then we want to set a margin bottom of 10 pixels. And if we remove this background grey, we can see that we need to set a height as well. So if we set this at 150 pixels to begin with, you can see that the images that aren't meant to be displayed at this height, if I just scroll down, you can see this one here is slightly squished. So there's a special CSS property for this called object fit, and you just want to set it to cover, and it will just zoom it nicely to the actual zoom that we need. So if we copy this now and add it to our page and paste this in here, so if we refresh, we can see now that whilst we don't have the exact display we're looking for, actually we need to make sure we remove this background color just here. So we just go back into our CSS, up to our image column class, and just remove that grey background. Okay, we can see the display we have now. So if we go back and compare these directly, so we zoom back out to 50%. So if we compare the two sites, we can see that this one has a slight curve to the way that everything is moved. So this one here, where as are all uniform, just there. These ones aren't. So if we remove this search box for the minute, okay, this lets us see what's going on a little bit easier. So we can see that these ones here are cut off, but for the most part there are 3, but they're slightly staggered. So we can see as we go into the middle here, so it's down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then it starts to go up again the other side. So we need to try and find a way to stagger these images down and then build them back up again. Okay, so there are a number of different ways you can do this. The most simple way could be to take all of these images into a design program like Sketch and manually move them down into the display that you want. So for example, in this site here, they have them, some drop down a long distance, some keep dropping down the same. You could create this in Sketch, save it into one image, and then have it as a background image. But in this video, I want to show you a different way you can do that by using the top position and making each of these relative position to the previous one. So I'll show you what I mean with this. So to begin with, we're going to go to our first item. So you can see we want to make changes to this image column here. And then one by one, we want to move them 10 pixels down until we get to the item in the middle. And then we start to move them 10 pixels up. So for the first one, we want this to stay where it is. And then for the second one, we want to say position, relative, top, 10 pixels. And then we're going to go through and add 20 pixels, 30 pixels, and so on until we get to 80 pixels. So I'll just fast forward through this. Okay, so now that we have 80 pixels, we want to start moving each item up. So this one will be 70, 60, and so on. Okay, and this is the final one we need to change. So that'll be 10 pixels. Now, as you can see, at the moment, we have it so that our middle item here is staggered at the bottom as well. And if we look at the example site, there's a straight line across here. Now, again, there's a number of different ways you can do this, but I think the best example, the best way we could do this for now is to scroll down so we can see the bottom of the page and then go up to our images display class here and set a maximum height of, let's try 500 pixels, and then want to use overflow hidden. So we can see now this has cut this off. If we zoom out even further, it's cut this off to a nice straight line. So if we were to look at the site zoomed in at 100%, we can see now that we have this smooth effect that moves the images down so it's more in a curve. Now, if you want, you can experiment with the number down that you move each of these. So, for example, some of these drop down quite significantly before then going back down to a more steady decrease there. So if you want to change this around, you can. But all you need to do to add this into your atom file is just to take each place where we've changed the CSS, like this, and either add it in as a style, or you can create a separate class. For example, so if this one we could say down 10, and then create a class over here that would be position relative top 10 pixels. Okay, so in the next video we'll continue on from this point and start to work on our search page. But just to be clear, you can use any images you want just here, and I'll share all of the code up until the end of this video in the description. So thanks for watching, and I'll join you in the next part of this series.